Yeah, so again, thank you for coming. I guess we'll just have you start off, just what was your position at St. Michael's?
Just, had been trained in safe environment with Virtus, and I was a teacher, a youth worker, volunteer. Everything was volunteer. I was also sacristan for a period, a short, very short period, but mostly youth work from the time I got there.
Because a big part of this whole everything revolves around safe environment and is it effective? What's the process by which you're trained? So can you just tell me, like, when you were trained for safe environment, how did that go down?
When I was first trained, before I started doing it online, it was a Methodist film that you watched. It was not Catholic.
Okay.
It was because Methodists have what they call safe sanctuaries. But I mean, and that was all removed, but I mean, the actual film itself was a Methodist film.
Yeah.
And just training you on what to look for, uh, you know, what not to do, what to do. And the key thing is you must report. You must report, you know.
Is there a test you have to take with this safe environment? Is it mindlessly easy?
Yes, it is. It really is. Because, I mean, you can do it as many times as you want to. I mean, it's not necessary to do it, more than once. But yeah, I would say it's pretty mindlessly easy.
Yeah. So do you think it's effective at actually doing what it's proposing to do?
Absolutely not. And I say that because when you do what they tell you to do, such as report, it doesn't matter.
So getting to that, what did you witness? What's a few things that
The
you would say?
specific thing that just his manner with boys. He had very little to do with girls, was rather rude to them in a Bible study situation or when he was talking, speaking, and if they would raise a question, he would almost demean them. But the boys were a different thing, and he was always, I mean, he would take the scapula out if they had it under their shirt and put it down and tap them on the nose, and these were not little boys, these were teenagers, just a intimate type, you know relationship, it seemed like, just affectionate things, nothing bad, but still something that you notice. And but the main thing that put the icing on the cake for me was the bodily contact, you know. And the night that we saw, if you want me to just go ahead and speak to that, was him almost just hand wrestling with the boys, and then the one that his favorite, he was behind him, and he would do this to the other boys too. He got behind him and was holding his arms outstretched and was pressed up against him at that point because
Back to
both
back or face to face?
father's front to the boy's back. Okay, in other words, the boy was facing the same way father was, and he was holding him out like this, and so the boy couldn't get loose because he was stronger, and he bent over the table where we ate our meals. Someone would always cook, and he bent over, which father didn't let go, and he was just kind of lifted up on his back and pressed completely against him. At that point, I looked at the youth director. She looked at me, and both of us were horrified at that particular kind of contact, and we discussed it after the youth meeting. She said, "What do we do?" I said, "Well, we're supposed to report it. And she was concerned about losing her job. So, and he was Father Mikel is very, I don't know what else to call it, but
There was reason to think that she might actually
that
lose
she
her
might,
job.
that he's just so rude and so mean, you know, in his manner and in his speaking to people. He's just abrupt, and I don't want to use what I would call somebody in the regular world a jerk.
So having you witnessed this, you were told in safe environment to report it. So can you tell the can you go through the process of like step by step what you did to finally write this letter? And because there were things that came before this.
Oh, there were many things that came before that. There were some things that came after that, you know, and then I also had friends that still worked with the youth. And long after, it was still going on. In other words, he was still physically in contact with, you know, and he was still going to the youth meetings. But the process of reporting it, I was hesitant because I didn't want her to lose her job either. At a later point, she even asked, after I had gone to the bishop, to his emissaries, she came to my house and asked me not to report it. And I told her, I said, I already have. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to lose her job. At that point, her son was involved in another incident with him. So that's also part of the reason she didn't want me to report it. But, so my first thing was to speak to priests. So I spoke to a total of probably, I would say, 7 different priests. 4 of them, maybe 5 of them, were in the diocese. Others were people, priests that I was corresponding with. One was in California. The final one was the priest that was the associate pastor there that was living with him. And he said that I had no choice, that I had to report it. So that left me with nothing. So I called Father James Brady, who was in charge of, I guess, those things, and asked him what I should do. He said, well, you should come and see me at the Chancery, which he had an office there. He's a canon law.
Oh, yeah.
And we made an appointment. I went. I listed everything down, and he was just very gracious and told me I had done the right thing, not to feel guilty about it, that they would handle it, and that he was going to go to the bishop, you know, with it.
And at this time, this was Bishop Jarrell.
Bishop Mikel Jarrell. And he told me that if I was needed for further questioning, would I be available? Asked me that, and I said yes.
Because this was in 2014?
Mm-hmm.
2014.
Yes. So that's kind of the process that I went through. But, I mean, I was counseled by, I could name them for you. I may have named them in the letter. I don't know if I did or not.
I think you had mentioned Father Brady.
Yeah, Father Brady's the one I actually went to, but I talked to him on the phone, and he again told me to come.
So after you talked to them, you go back home. You were told that they would take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
When did you? What tipped you off that maybe that wasn't happening?
Well, just one of the ladies. Well, the other incident that happened, I think that's included in one of the letters. But the other incident that happened was that indicated to me that he was maybe mad. Somebody had maybe talked to him, because I got. Well, I told you that I got threats and called all kinds of names and liar and this never happened and all this kind of stuff.
At the time in 2014, people.
No, this was after the next incident, and because he had pulled up, he was with the youth director's son. He was bringing him home from work, who was a minor at the time, and but I was had walked out into the street in front of my house, and I had no idea who was coming, but they were coming like at me. Most cars, when you're somebody standing on the road, go out. Well, he was not going out, and he came right directly into me, to the point where I had to step off of the road, and I thought I was going to have to jump down in a ditch, which was like really deep. Then I said, he rolled down his window, and I said, "Are you crazy?" And not a way to speak to a priest, I know, but
Well, he
I
just ran
was
you off the road.
I was not happy. And he thought it was funny, and then he, like I said, he had in the car with him. Not acceptable as far as safe environment. They're not supposed to be alone with boys, since all of the stuff that has happened.
Right.
And so he sped away, rolled his window back up, and sped away. Didn't say anything.
So, when did you, because I know there's two things or at least two other things that happened, that you eventually wrote these letters and you mailed it in after you initially just verbally reported it.
Right.
And then at some point you also had to ask, you tried to contact the diocese to get a copy of something back?
Well, when I had gone to Father Brady, I think it was a typed, I don't remember if I wrote it, just hand wrote it, or a list of things that had gone on that were, just to me, not conducive to a good youth program, a good relationship between priest and young people,
Yeah.
and nothing vile, or it was just mostly just rudeness and demeaning to other people. So, but I had compiled a list of all the things from the point of Father Mikel sharing his private phone calls with other parishioners. I think that may be even included in there, and talking ugly about them. None of my business. Not something that should be discussed in an open room with young people there and other adults there.
Yeah. So you had made a list of things that when you met with Father Brady,
and he said, no, well, he asked me, he said, I made it really, and it may have, I want to think it was handwritten. Part of it was anyway, and because he asked me if he could have it, and I said, yeah,
so you left it. Later on, when did you ask them to get a copy back?
Oh, gosh, I don't know that I can remember exactly, but it was after other things happened.
And you just wanted it back?
I just wanted it back to put everything together that was going on.
And they never responded to you?
Oh, no. Would not give it to me.
Were you able to actually talk to anyone?
Talk to
anyone in the chancery when you were asking for this
I can't give you a name. I did. I called, and then I spoke to Father Brady again.
But he never
No.
gave you a copy back?
No.
Did he say he would or he wouldn't?
Yes, he said for sure, but I never got a copy back.
Did you ever try to get in touch with the bishop directly?
Yes. Wrote a letter to the bishop directly, but was directed to, I don't know if I even still have the letter. They returned the letter, replied. I was directed to, I want to say, DeBlanc.
Okay.
Maybe it was a copy to DeBlanc.
Jeff DeBlanc?
Yes, a copy to Mallet.
Monsignor Mallet. He was the Vicar General.
Yes.
So he was second under.
Right, and then to the bishop. So we sent a letter to all three.
And that's this letter, these letters?
No. Well, I don't know if it was all, I don't remember if it was all included or what. We just wanted to come into the bishop's office.
Oh, you contacted them because y'all wanted to meet with the bishop?
And sit down and talk to him. And he directed us to whatever information would go to these other just write a letter.
And
Well, they already had all the information. So we were not ever able to talk to the bishop, to even go into the waiting area of his office.
so when you couldn't actually meet with the bishop, that's when y'all composed these letters?
Yes.
And then just for the record, you were not alone in seeing things and writing letters.
No, a friend of mine, totally separate. I mean, incidents. He was not. He had worked with the youth at one time, but he didn't like the way that things were going, so he had stopped working with the youth. But he also did prison ministry, and like I said, we were friends, and so he had his own experience, that he.
So a separate experience. He wrote a letter. You wrote a letter. Y'all sent him in. So this isn't just you. More than
Oh
one.
no! Oh yes!
So,
Oh
just
yes!
to say that
he saw something with the same young man that I saw. I mean, I saw other things, or didn't actually see it with my eyes, but he was just too physical.
So you write these letters. You send it in to Monsignor Mallet, Bishop Jarrell, and
DeBlanc, I believe.
Yeah.
It should have
Yeah, it
copies.
says.
Is that who it was?
Jeff,
I'm trying to make
So
sure.
you send these in. Did you ever get any response to these letters?
Just a cursory. Thank you. We'll take care of it.
Okay. And in your opinion, was it ever taken care of?
No.
Because
another friend of mine that worked with the youth and one of the youth themselves would let me know that, I mean, not on purpose, we would just be talking, and he's still coming to the youth group meetings, and he's still doing the same things,
When was he put in charge of the school?
He was put in charge of St. Michael's when he came to the church, I believe. And then when Father, why can't I think of his name? That was at Immaculate Heart, when he left, he was the dean of Notre Dame. And when he left, then they gave the deanery to Father Michael.
Was this after you first reported this behavior?
I believe so.
So their response, their correction was to put him over more children.
Exactly. But when all of this occurred, he had already been reported to the bishop by somebody that's still there as a vicar for misuse of finances in the church. And he came to me and was sitting down and saying, crying. Just couldn't, Father Michael did, because he just couldn't believe he would be reported like that,
So someone reported for Michael?
Someone had already reported, before this ever came up.
For financial things?
For financial reasons.
And he was upset because he couldn't believe somebody would report him?
Yes.
Not that they would believe him to be guilty, but that they would report him.
I guess so. Because I think it's just like the police. They have this thin blue line, and they support each other. Or there's a thin black line in the priesthood, which that they take up for each other and lie for each other and whatever, It's everywhere in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's not in the faithful necessarily, but it's in the hierarchy from the lowly priest on up to the top. And I just don't see Jesus inhabiting that kind of filth, because children are involved. Children are being hurt. Children are not being taught the true faith. It depends on who you get. They could be being taught, and I don't mean this is not a political statement, they're being taught liberal ways.
Yeah.
In other words, rather than God's ways.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely, yeah.
And my heart is for young people. Always has been. I taught, for years.
Have you been ostracized by anyone?
Oh, by the people, and not necessarily priests. Every post that I would make, they would put liar, liar, and stuff like that, and they were going to keep doing that. They were in one of the young men was in college, and he thought that Father Mikel hung the moon, So there's a large segment that he attends to, and they think he does no wrong. But then there's another segment that sees him for what he is,
So you talked to 5 local priests. You said you talked to some
I would say
outside,
there was 5 of them, yes.
asking their
What should I do? I presented what happened and said, what should I do?
and their response.
Go to the bishop.
They all said go to the bishop.
Another thing that might be a point is that Father Mikel went to some of these priests and had a fit and was very abusive, verbally abusive to them for encouraging me to go to the bishop instead of coming to him. And one of them said, why would I encourage her to go to you when you were the one perpetrating the behavior? So, and I mean, like I said, it was really rude to the ones that actually told me. I don't know if he knows that the one living with him at the time told me to. I don't know if he knows that the one living with him before this one also told me to. And as a later, and since then, I went to confession probably a little over a year ago, 14 months ago, something like that, to the one that lived with him before, which is now the vicar of priest. And he was filling the pulpit for someone. I did not know he was in the confessional. When I walked in the confessional, he gave me a big hug. We sat down. I always go face to face for confession. And he told me, he said, it must have been really bad for you doing, what you did. And he said, but I just want you to know that you did the right thing. This is a year ago.
Yeah.
A little over a year ago.
Okay, so this was after the SSPD
After
reports.
everything, yes.
And they're still saying you did the right thing. So I guess what I want to know is all these priests tell you to your face, yes, go to the bishop, you need to report it. They're always sending it up the chain of command.
Pardon?
But they're always sending it up the chain of command,
yes.
Assuming that the bishop will do something. To your knowledge, the bishop never did anything about it.
I heard, this is just hearsay, is that he went and told him that he wasn't acting right. He needed to change his,
But he didn't change.
Oh, no. No.
And then the next bishop comes in, Bishop Desatel, and he told SSPD that he's been corrected.
Well, the only thing that I could think of was, I think it was Miss Fontenot that went and did the correction, actually.
Okay.
And I don't know that he was ever.
So it still leaves at least five priests who heard from you of these reports, told you that it was worth reporting. Is there any responsibility on these priests who have heard of this and are not following it up, do you think?
I still attributed that to the black line. They all support each other. It's just like that the priest that I was talking about that just for a year ago, we used to have lunch quite frequently. And at that confession time...
You and who had lunch?
The priest that was
was
living with him before the one, the vicar of priests now. He and I used to have lunch. At that particular confession, when I did confession, did my penance. When we walked out of church, I said, well, we need to have lunch sometime. And because he is the vicar of priests now, he said that would really be complicated. So, party man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And but before that, when we would have lunch on occasion, I just would buy us lunch and just, and I was furious about all of the homosexuality in the church, not pedophilia, but homosexuality. And I would vent those concerns to him. And he told me, he said, this was my ears from his mouth. He said, you have no idea how much is in the priesthood locally.
Wow.
So,
Is there anything else that you have that you can think of? Any other part of the story that I might have missed?
there was just so much and so many things, and so from the time he came, the things that he was, and that was all included, and that was again the vicar of priests. One of them was to tell us, the youth director and myself, about Father Michael's. When he first came to the church, he brought several young men alone in the car with him to help him unload and set himself up in the new church. And
From the previous parish.
From the previous parish,
Iota.
and that's another. That's just not. They're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But it's no big deal, evidently. So I don't know if that was included in there, but it might have been. You don't want to put hearsay because but when it's from a priest, you think, well, why would he say that he had a bunch of youth with him that he had to take back?
Right.
And
And then I guess we can just say for the record that just so that there's no doubt, you've never saw him doing anything illegal or sexual contact, like actual sexual
No.
contact. But certainly the whole point here is that there are certain indicators that are alarming, that are in violation of safe environment.
He was definitely in violation of safe environment.
And you have some background in psychology?
Yes.
So when you see these behaviors, you're an educated person in determining what this means, and this was alarming behavior.
Yes, it was disordered behavior.
Disordered behavior.
Yes.
One thing that's just interesting from a historical perspective, back in the 80s when Father Gothe was...
What part?
Father Gilbert Gothe?
Yes.
Back in the 80s. And one thing that was said about him, they said, well, it was not sexual behavior as such, but it was indicative of more. So they kept moving him around.
Exactly.
But from our history, and we know 40 years ago, they were seeing behaviors that could be suggesting something else.
Exactly.
How does it make any sense that now we're presented with the same thing of not illegal behavior, but things that are indicative of more, and yet we still don't do anything about it? Has the diocese changed at all in 40 years?
No, it's worse, in my opinion.
Are children safe in the Diocese of Lafayette?
No, they're not. No, they're not. Absolutely not. So guard them. Guard them.